Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am Preeti Kumari and today I am back with another lecture of the DBMS series. So in the last lecture we got to know more about databases, database management system, its application, its uses and much more things. Today we would be knowing more about types of databases. So as you can see on my screen, there are many databases I have listed down, almost 11. But we don't need to know in depth about all the databases. There are some database we should be knowing a bit more depth, but we can get a slight idea on all the databases. So let's start. So on the very first, we are having relational database, that is among the most widely used databases. So in relational database, what happens? In that database, there is a collection of data items, which is kind of having some relation between them. So consider I am having a database or a table I am having. In this table, there are certain number of rows, certain number of columns, and these are having some relations in between them. So basically that is a relational database. Now coming to the second thing, that is NoSQL database. NoSQL means not SQL. So basically in NoSQL database what happens na ki they don't follow any kind of format. So the data items are kind of stored in a key value pair. So what happens ki we have a key and we have a value and our data is stored in kind of this key value pair. Consider an example, we have a key as place and the value being stored as Mysore. So there is no restriction or there is no relational way it follows to store the data. Like in relational database models, we basically use rows and columns to store the data, and it's like corresponding to this row there should be this data, corresponding to this column there should be this data. So we don't follow that much of strictness or that much of relational approach or a traditional relational approach to store our data. We store our data in the form of key value pair, which we basically do in a hash map. So now the third one is object-oriented database. As the name suggests, object-oriented. So basically whenever the data is stored in the form of object, it is called as object-oriented database. We will be looking more about this in the further slides. Now fourth one is in-memory database. So what happens in in-memory database? Now the database or the data is stored in memory, like it is stored in the primary memory, not in the hard disk or any SanDisk or SSD anywhere. So basically it is stored in memory. So that is why it is called as in-memory database. Now the fifth one is time series database. So in database what happens now, ki consider we are having a series of events on a different time intervals. So that kind of events or that kind of time intervals are basically like a time value pair. It is stored in this time series database. Now sixth one is spatial database. So basically spatial is something like a kind of a, we can say a 2D thing or something which represents something. So basically in spatial database what happens is ki we generally tend to store the geometric space in the database. Don't worry if you're not getting these terms because it's just a basic intro of these databases. You don't need to know in much more depth about all these databases. Now the seventh one is multimedia database. So as the name suggests, it is a collection of databases which is having like collection of data which is having text, images, graphics and much more things. Now eighth one is columnar database. So basically in this database, every data is stored in columns, not rows. Now ninth one is XML database. Again, as the name suggests, in this database, the data is stored in the form of XML. Now 10th one is NewSQL database. So what NewSQL database does na, ki there might be some gaps in relational databases. There might be some gaps in NoSQL database. So basically it becomes a bridge for all the gaps between SQL and NoSQL databases. 11th one is blockchain database. In this blockchain database, the data is stored in the form of blocks. So basically it is kind of a decentralized way in which data is stored. So data is basically stored in the kind of blocks. So there are 4 databases which we would be looking in depth because relational database is kind of most used database. NoSQL database is also widely used, and object oriented database and in-memory database, I guess according to the semester point of view, you should be knowing about it. Not very much in-depth knowledge, but you should be having some knowledge about it. So let's have a look on all these 4 databases. So basically the first one is relational database. So these databases structure data into organized tables that have predefined connections between them. So as I told na ki whenever like tables have some connections or have some relations among them, it is called as relational database. So consider there is a table 1 T1 and there is a table 2 T2. Consider that they have a kind of a relation between them. Relation, how you can say what kind of relation or something like that. So let's see. Consider there is a table which is having my name and my roll number. Consider the table T2 which is having my name and the place I live in. So this is also a data about me, and this table also contains a data about me. So they have a relation which is like the information about me is also present in this T1 and the information about me is also present in this T2. So this is kind of a collection of interrelated data. So this is like a connection between them. Now data manipulation and query performed using SQL. So basically in these kind of databases, the data manipulation like kind of insert, update, delete and every other operations are performed using SQL queries. Now well-known databases are MySQL, PostgreSQL, Oracle database and Microsoft SQL Server. So this is all about relational databases. Now coming to the second term, that is NoSQL databases. So NoSQL database are created to handle data that does not fit neatly into the strict setup of traditional relational databases. So what does this means? Again, like few minutes ago I told you what does NoSQL database mean. So basically in NoSQL database what happened now, we don't store in a form of rows and columns and we don't do any kind of queries ki theek hai, from this row we are getting this particular things, from this column we need this. So we don't do store data in that format. Basically data is stored in the form of key value pair, which I earlier explained. Consider there is a key called as place. So the value would be Mysore. So basically in a form of key value pair, the data is being stored. You can say in a form of hash map. And in relational database models, basically the data is stored in the form of rows and columns. They have some unique key which uniquely identifies the table. And there are more things in relational database model which is not followed here. So that is why it is called as NoSQL, that is not SQL. Like there are many things people say, but considering like it is a database where we don't use any SQL queries which don't follow any kind of relational databases. So the third one in this list is object-oriented database. So these databases hold objects utilized in object-oriented programming. So you might have heard about OOPS, that is object-oriented programming. What basically OOPS does, it stores everything as object. There are instances of object which is called as class. So basically in object-oriented database, the objects is stored as a form of data which are like instances of class, and the combination of objects and classes is called as object-oriented database. So they work well for the applications with intricate data designs like scientific simulations and multimedia software. So here they are mostly used. Now fourth one is in-memory database. So in this database, data is kept in the primary memory, that is RAM, rather than on a disk, leading to a quicker data retrieval. So basically in-memory database, what we do now, we keep the data in the primary memory, not in the hard disk or not in the SSD. We keep the data in the primary memory, and whenever we keep the data in the primary memory, what it helps now, it helps to improvise the time, as we don't need to make some data retrieval from the SSD, rather than we can make the data retrieval from the primary memory itself. So they are employed in application that demand instant data processing and top-notch performance. Obviously it will give a top-notch performance because the time of consuming the data is very less. We are not consuming data from SSD or from hard disk. So basically this was all about this video of types of database. You don't need to know more about all the 11 databases, but it would be good to have a small basic knowledge about all the database. So if you like this video, please hit the like button, and if you're liking this series, please share it among your friends. Till then, take care, keep learning, keep growing. Bye all.